I got involved with the Shroud in the mid-70s because I operated a photographic studio, commercial studio, but mostly a lot of scientific, technical, medical, technical things.
New discovery regarding the Shroud of Turin. Courts say there is new evidence the shroud is 2,000 years old, which coincides with our Lord's life and crucifixion.
Barrie Schwortz arrived in Turin in 1978 as a skeptic. By the time he left, he carried a mystery that would stay with him for the next 46 years. He wasn't a believer chasing miracles. He was a Jewish photographer with no attachment to Christian relics, no hidden agenda, just a camera and a task: document the science. But the moment he began studying that 14-foot linen cloth, something didn't add up. The image imprinted on it, the presence of blood, the strange chemical properties, none of it behaved the way science said it should. Every test seemed to raise more questions than answers. Now, in 2024, new DNA analysis has taken things even further. What scientists have discovered within those ancient fibers doesn't just cast doubt on the idea that it's a forgery. It pushes us to rethink what we understand about human history and possibly even human existence itself. This isn't about religion, it's about evidence. Evidence that is physical, measurable, and, as Barrie Schwortz himself describes it, seemingly impossible to explain. The Shroud of Turin raises one haunting question. Could this really be the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth? Stay with this, because what comes next might completely change how you see the story. Here's where it gets strange. Most forgeries don't survive close inspection. Look closely enough and you'll find the brushstrokes. Run chemical tests and pigments show up. Study the fibers and artificial dyes are revealed. Fakes are designed to look convincing from a distance, but they fall apart under scrutiny. The Shroud of Turin has been examined up close for more than 100 years, and instead of unraveling, the mystery only deepens. The cloth itself measures about 14 feet 3 inches long and 3 feet 7 inches wide. On it is a faint sepia-toned image of a man's body, both front and back, as if the linen had been laid over a body lengthwise, with the head near the center. The figure shows signs of intense suffering, marks that resemble a brutal beating, wounds at the wrists and feet consistent with crucifixion, and a side wound that appears to match a spear injury. The more closely scientists study it, the less it behaves like anything they've seen before. And that's what makes it so difficult to explain. The most natural explanation is simple. Someone must have painted it. Maybe a skilled medieval artist, a determined forger, someone with enough talent and time to create a convincing religious relic. But that idea starts to fall apart when you look at the actual evidence. When scientists examined the shroud under high magnification, they didn't find what you'd expect from a painting. There were no brushstrokes, no layers of pigment, no changes in thickness that would suggest any known painting or dyeing method. Normally, paint seeps into fabric. It spreads through the fibers. Dye does the same. Stains penetrate. This image didn't. Instead, the discoloration is limited to an incredibly thin layer on the surface of the fibers, just the outermost 200 to 600 nanometers. To understand how thin that is, consider this. A single human hair is about 70,000 nanometers wide. That means the image only affects a layer less than 1% of a hair's thickness. The inside of each thread remains completely untouched. Even the backside of the cloth shows no image at all. No known technique, medieval, ancient, or even modern, can create an image that's shallow and precise. And it gets even stranger under ultraviolet light. Old linen typically glows under UV due to natural aging and the breakdown of organic materials. The background of the shroud behaves exactly as expected. It fluoresces faintly. But the image areas, the parts forming the human figure, don't glow at all. It's a detail that doesn't fit with any known method of painting, staining, or printing, and it only deepens the mystery. Under ultraviolet light, the image areas didn't just fail to glow, they actually appeared darker. It was as if the fibers themselves had been chemically changed at a molecular level, not simply stained from the outside, but altered from within. And this change wasn't random. It followed a precise, controlled pattern that matched the exact anatomy of the human figure on the cloth. The Shroud of Turin has been studied for decades, with researchers trying to understand its origin, history, and the mystery behind its formation. But one discovery in particular left experts stunned. When photographers first developed negatives of the shroud, something unexpected happened. The faint image on the cloth transformed into a remarkably clear, detailed human face, with depth, shadows, and lifelike features. In other words, the image on the shroud already behaves like a photographic negative, where light and dark are reversed. That's hard to explain. Photography wasn't invented until the 1820s, yet carbon dating later suggested the cloth may have originated between 1260 and 1390 AD, hundreds of years before anyone even understood photographic processes. So how could someone in medieval Europe create an image that functions exactly like a photographic negative, using technology that wouldn't exist for another 500 years? Then came another layer to the mystery. In 1976, NASA researchers used a VP-8 image analyzer, a device designed to extract three-dimensional data from satellite images on photographs of the shroud. The result was astonishing. The image translated into a consistent three-dimensional form of a human body. The brightness of different areas directly matched the distance between the cloth and the body it covered. Features that would have been closest to the cloth, like the tip of the nose or the cheekbones, appeared darker. Areas farther away, such as the sides of the face or the spaces between the fingers, appeared lighter. It wasn't just an image, it carried depth, structure, and spatial information in a way no ordinary painting or imprint ever could. This phenomenon is known as distance mapping, where three-dimensional spatial information is encoded onto a flat, two-dimensional surface. Paintings simply don't work like that. If you take a normal painting and run it through the same VP-8 analysis, the result is distorted and meaningless. That's because artists paint what they see, light and shadow, not the actual physical distance between objects. But the image on the shroud behaves differently. It's as if whatever created it was responding to real physical proximity, almost measuring the distance between the body and the cloth rather than just capturing how it looked. After 5 days of intense study in 1978, a team of more than 30 scientists came to a striking conclusion. They stated that the image represents a real human body, specifically a man who had been scourged and crucified, and that it was not created by an artist. They couldn't explain what it was, but they were confident about what it wasn't. Even decades later, with far more advanced technology, no one has been able to fully recreate all the unique features of the shroud's image using any known method, ancient or modern. Then came a turning point. In 1988, the Vatican approved radiocarbon dating of the shroud, a test expected to finally settle the debate. Small samples were taken from one corner of the cloth and sent to 3 independent laboratories: Oxford University, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. Each lab conducted its analysis separately, only comparing results afterward. All 3 came back with the same conclusion. The linen dated to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD, squarely in the medieval period. The announcement hit like a final verdict. According to the carbon-14 tests, the Shroud of Turin, long believed by many to be the burial cloth of Jesus, was actually a medieval creation, made more than 1,000 years after his death. Headlines around the world declared the mystery solved. The shroud, they said, was nothing more than a forgery. Science had delivered its verdict. But the very scientists who spent 5 days closely examining every inch of the cloth in 1978 weren't convinced. And the more researchers looked into the 1988 testing process, the more a serious issue came into focus. The sample used for carbon dating came from just one place, a single corner of the cloth, not the center, not a protected inner section, not an area chosen for being clean or untouched. Instead, it was taken from the very edge that had been handled the most during public displays and centuries of veneration. That same corner was also closest to the damage from a major fire in 1532, which scorched parts of the cloth and led to urgent repair work. Textile experts later pointed out something even more concerning: signs of possible reweaving in that area. In other words, newer threads may have been woven together with the original material, creating a blend of fibers from different time periods. This matters because standard radiocarbon dating procedures for ancient textiles are very clear. You're supposed to take multiple samples from different parts of the object, especially from untouched interior areas, far away from edges, repairs, or contamination. That's done specifically to avoid distorted results, since handling, environmental exposure, and restoration can significantly affect dating accuracy, especially for something that's hundreds or even thousands of years old. But in 1988, that protocol wasn't followed. Later, independent statistical analysis of the raw data revealed inconsistencies in the measurements taken from different parts of that small sample. If the cloth were truly uniform in age, those readings should have been consistent. Instead, they showed unusual variation. Some scientists concluded that the tested material might not have been reliable at all, that it could have been a mixture of different fabrics, possibly from repairs rather than the original cloth. If that's true, then the famous medieval date may not represent the age of the shroud itself, but only the age of a repaired section. What the data actually showed was something unexpected, more variation than you'd expect from a uniform, single-age sample. That kind of inconsistency usually points to one of two things. Either the sample was heavily contaminated, or it contained threads from different time periods woven together. Researchers who later examined this statistical issue came to a more careful conclusion. The 1988 test proved that the specific corner they sampled dated to the medieval period, likely the late 1300s. But it did not prove that the entire cloth is medieval. That's not a small detail, that's the whole debate. A cloth could be 2,000 years old and still have a corner repaired in the 14th century. If you only test that repaired section and treat the result as applying to the whole cloth, that isn't solid science, it's a sampling mistake presented as certainty. Then the mystery took a new turn. In 2015, Italian researchers studying the shroud collected dust particles from its surface and attempted to extract DNA. The first results were interesting but not definitive. They found traces of human DNA, along with plant DNA from different regions, suggesting the cloth may have traveled through parts of Europe and the Middle East over time. It was intriguing, but not enough to draw firm conclusions. So the findings were set aside. In 2022, a new team revisited those same samples, this time using far more advanced genetic sequencing technology. They were searching for details that earlier methods might have missed, and this time, they found something unusual. Within the human DNA sequences, researchers identified genetic markers that didn't clearly match any known population. The material was undeniably human, Homo sapiens, not animal contamination or degraded DNA from another source. But the specific combination of markers didn't align with any recognized genetic profile in current databases. Not European, not Middle Eastern, not even ancient populations reconstructed from archaeological remains. And not any known mix that fits established patterns of human migration or interbreeding. Around the same time, additional infrared testing suggested the cloth itself could be as old as 2,300 years, far older than the medieval date proposed in 1988. If these findings hold up, they don't just reopen the case, they complicate it even further. The Human Genome Project has given scientists a detailed global map of human genetic variation. Every population carries its own unique markers, small genetic differences that developed over time as groups spread out and evolved in different regions. When populations mix, their DNA follows patterns we can track. These patterns match known migration routes, historical contact, and interbreeding over time. Because of this, geneticists can usually look at a DNA profile and trace it back to specific regions or populations with surprising accuracy. But the DNA found on the shroud didn't point anywhere familiar. One of the researchers involved described the result very clearly. The genetic markers suggested ancestry from populations that, according to current knowledge, never overlapped geographically. Normally, you'd expect to see markers that are European or Middle Eastern, or a combination that reflects known historical mixing. Instead, the shroud sample showed a combination that doesn't fit any established model of human population genetics, as if it shouldn't exist in a single individual. And the deeper scientists looked, the stranger it became. Some of the genetic variants appeared to be very ancient, markers linked to early human populations that had largely disappeared from the gene pool thousands of years before the 1st century AD. These weren't Neanderthal or Denisovan traces. It was something else, like a genetic profile carrying fragments from populations that, as far as we know, never interacted, including traits that should have faded away long ago. When these findings reached Barrie Schwortz in early 2023, his reaction was immediate skepticism. He understood how unreliable ancient DNA analysis can be. Over time, DNA breaks down. Contamination builds up from centuries of human contact. Errors in sequencing can easily produce misleading results. Unusual findings from ancient samples are often traced back to technical issues, not genuine biological anomalies. Schwortz wasn't ready to accept such extraordinary claims based on a single report. So instead of dismissing it outright, or blindly believing it, he took a closer look. He reviewed the methods used and spoke directly with the geneticists behind the study, trying to understand exactly how they reached such a surprising conclusion. The research team didn't take shortcuts. They ran multiple independent controls to make sure their results were reliable. They tested samples from different areas of the cloth to separate original biological material from contamination caused by centuries of handling. They also compared the unusual DNA sequences against large genetic databases covering thousands of human populations. On top of that, they repeated the core analysis several times and kept getting the same results. What they were seeing wasn't random noise. Even more interesting, these unusual genetic markers kept showing up in samples taken specifically from the image areas and the bloodstains, not from the general surface of the cloth where contamination from handling would normally be strongest. So researchers seriously considered 3 possible explanations. First, contamination. Over hundreds of years, many people have touched the cloth. In theory, that could create a mixed and confusing genetic signal. But contamination usually looks messy, random, inconsistent, and chaotic. What they found instead was structured and consistent, the opposite of what contamination should produce. Second, they considered whether the DNA could belong to an ancient, isolated population with unusual genetic traits. Sometimes, small populations develop rare genetic patterns over time. But even those groups still fall within the known range of human genetic variation. This profile didn't fit within those boundaries at all. Third, they looked at the possibility of DNA degradation. Ancient DNA often breaks down, which can lead to errors in sequencing. But again, those errors tend to be random. They don't repeatedly produce the same clear structured pattern across multiple tests. In this case, the results were consistent every time. And that consistency suggested something important. This wasn't just damage, contamination, or noise, it looked like a real signal. Every conventional explanation had serious flaws. And when researchers honestly worked through each possibility, what remained was unsettling. The DNA might be real, and it could belong to someone whose genetic background doesn't fit into any current model of human population history. But long before the DNA studies, before the carbon dating debates, there was a man who witnessed the mystery firsthand. In 1978, a 32-year-old Jewish photographer from Los Angeles found himself at the center of something he never expected. Barrie Schwortz wasn't connected to Christianity, nor was he searching for religious meaning. He grew up with no bias against it, just distance. The Shroud of Turin, if he had thought about it at all, was simply part of someone else's tradition, not his own. What he did have, however, was a deep commitment to precision. For Schwortz, photography wasn't about art or interpretation. It was about accuracy. It meant understanding light, mastering optics, and capturing exactly what was there, not what people wanted to see. He approached his work with discipline and attention to detail, building his skills methodically over time. By his late 20s, he had earned a solid reputation in Los Angeles as a reliable scientific and technical photographer. His clients weren't looking for creative images. They needed documentation that could stand up to close examination. He worked with hospitals, research labs, and industrial facilities where accuracy mattered more than aesthetics. That reputation led to a life-changing phone call in 1977. A group of American scientists was preparing a groundbreaking investigation, the first comprehensive scientific study of the Shroud of Turin using modern technology. They needed someone they could trust to document every step of the process, every test, every reading, every detail, without error. Schwortz was chosen for the job. He would become the official documenting photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project, responsible for capturing every sample location and every moment of the investigation with absolute reliability. They needed someone whose visual record would be so precise that anyone could review it, even decades later, without doubt. At first, Barrie Schwortz didn't take it too seriously. To him, the shroud seemed like nothing more than a medieval forgery, a relic surrounded by centuries of belief and tradition. He wasn't expecting to uncover anything extraordinary. But the opportunity to document a major scientific investigation of one of the world's most famous artifacts was interesting enough to accept. So he packed his equipment and joined what became known as STURP, the Shroud of Turin research project. What came together in Turin in October 1978 was extraordinary. More than 30 scientists from different fields gathered for the study. There were physicists from Los Alamos National Laboratory, the same facility that helped develop the first atomic bomb. Chemists from leading universities across the United States, textile experts, forensic specialists, and image analysts. They came from different backgrounds and beliefs, Christians, Jews, and agnostics, but they shared one goal: follow the evidence wherever it led, no matter the outcome. On October 8, 1978, they entered the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. For 5 days and nights, from October 8th to October 13th, they were given unrestricted access to the cloth. Schwortz documented everything, every instrument, every test setup, every sample location, every result captured as it happened. His job was to create a complete and permanent visual record of the entire investigation. Documentation detailed enough to stand up to scrutiny from any researcher, anywhere, for generations. He wasn't there to prove anything. He wasn't there to disprove anything. He was there to record exactly what was in front of him. And what he documented during those 5 days didn't just stay in Turin. It stayed with him for the rest of his life. I first got involved with the Shroud back in the mid-1970s, Schwortz explained. I was running a commercial photography studio at the time, but much of my work focused on scientific, technical, and medical subjects, along with product imaging. What began as a professional assignment turned into a lifelong pursuit. Over the decades, Schwortz stayed deeply involved, continuing research, launching Shroud.com, giving hundreds of lectures, appearing in documentaries, and engaging in countless discussions with both believers and skeptics. Each group wanted the evidence to point clearly in one direction, but the reality was never that simple. Then, in early 2024, after 46 years of careful, evidence-based work, Barrie Schwortz spoke out publicly. He didn't do it quietly or reluctantly. He released a video statement that reflected nearly half a century of disciplined research, coming from a man known for never going beyond what the data could support. His conclusion was clear. After examining the cloth for decades, documenting every test, and reviewing every piece of evidence, he could no longer accept the idea that the shroud is simply a medieval forgery. He pointed to several key issues. The image itself doesn't match any known artistic method from any period in history. The 1988 carbon dating, which placed the cloth between 1250 and 1350 AD, still carries unresolved methodological concerns that have never been fully addressed. And now, the more recent DNA findings, showing genetic sequences that don't align with any known human population, add an entirely new layer of mystery to an already unclassifiable object. Importantly, Schwortz didn't claim that the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus. He didn't make any religious argument. What he did say on record is that the physical, chemical, and genetic evidence simply doesn't fit conventional explanations, that there is something genuinely unusual, perhaps even extraordinary, about this cloth, and that dismissing it as an obvious medieval fake is no longer scientifically justified. The reaction was immediate and divided. Many Christian communities welcomed his statement, seeing it as support for beliefs they had long held. Some religious media even suggested that science had finally caught up with faith. Schwortz was quick to push back, not just against easy dismissal, but also against exaggerated conclusions. These findings don't prove any religious claims, he emphasized more than once. Something being unusual doesn't automatically make it miraculous. The data raises important questions, but it doesn't answer the biggest one. The scientific community responded with caution, as expected. Some geneticists who reviewed the DNA results agreed that they were unusual, but pointed out clear limitations. The sample size was small and the risk of contamination was high, too high to draw firm conclusions. They called for independent verification, larger sample sets, and stricter controls. Those are reasonable demands, and Schwortz agreed with them. Skeptics also raised valid points. Strange results in ancient DNA studies are not uncommon, and they're often explained by contamination or degradation rather than something truly unknown. Without independent replication, the DNA findings should be treated as preliminary. And yet, there's a bigger issue that no one has fully resolved. No group, whether skeptics, scientists, or religious commentators, has been able to explain the full set of evidence when it's all considered together. The way the image formed is still unknown, even after decades of study by leading experts. The three-dimensional encoding within the image doesn't match any known artistic technique from any time or culture. And now, the DNA findings add another layer of mystery on top of physical and chemical properties that were already difficult to explain. One historian pointed out something striking. The shroud has been studied more intensely than almost any other archaeological artifact in history. And even after all that research, scientists still can't say with certainty what it is, when it was made, or how the image was created. That alone is remarkable. Looking ahead, Schwortz has been clear about what needs to happen next. He believes the research should move forward with new radiocarbon dating, this time using samples taken from multiple areas across the cloth, especially untouched interior sections, and using different dating methods to verify the results. He also calls for new DNA testing, focused specifically on the blood-stained areas with strict contamination controls in place, strong enough to finally settle the ongoing questions about the genetic findings. What comes next is clear. Careful, systematic attempts to recreate the image using every proposed method, lasers, radiation, chemical reactions, heat, to see if any of them can truly match what's on the cloth. Alongside that, a full chemical analysis using modern technology, tools that simply didn't exist back in 1978. But there are real challenges. Access to the shroud is tightly controlled by its custodians in Turin. Funding research on an artifact surrounded by religious debate is difficult to secure. These barriers have slowed down progress and delayed answers that could have been explored years ago. Barrie Schwortz, now 78, isn't focused on those obstacles. He's focused on the evidence. He always has been. He was just a photographer sent to Turin in 1978 for what was supposed to be a 5-day assignment. But that assignment turned into the defining work of his life. Not because he was searching for meaning, but because the evidence he encountered wouldn't let him walk away. Now, after decades of study, his perspective carries weight. Schwortz began as a skeptic, and in many ways he still is. He's someone who demands solid evidence before drawing conclusions, someone who refuses to replace data with belief. But after 46 years, the data has led him somewhere unexpected. He hasn't found all the answers, but he's convinced of one thing. There is something truly extraordinary about this cloth, and science still doesn't fully understand it. The image is real. The DNA findings are real. The questions are real. And if answers ever come, they will require a willingness to follow the evidence, no matter where it leads, even if it challenges what we think we know. If this made you think, pass it on to someone else. Because the questions that matter most are rarely the ones with easy answers.